Let's go. Welcome in to an emergency podcast edition of the PHNX D-Backs podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at the DraftKings Sportsbook app and the MLB Hot Stove. I am your head chef, occasionally known as Derek Montilla. This is my sous chef, the one and only Jesse Friedman. Jesse! Daulton Varsho and all of his tools are off to Toronto in exchange for what many people are calling an absolute fleecing in what the D-Backs are getting in return. And it's obviously one of the things we're very excited about. It is a name we've talked about in catcher Gabriel Moreno.
What a day. What a day. Of course, this inevitably happened after we recorded our audio podcast earlier today. It was only a matter of time before something like this went down. But this is a move. So if you go back and listen to some of our past shows, we didn't talk about this swap in particular. We actually talked about an Alek Thomas for Gabby Moreno swap, right, which, of course, wound up ultimately not working out, which we didn't necessarily expect it would happen anyway. But this is a deal. I guess what I'm saying is this is a deal, the structure of this deal where the Blue Jays give up one of their catchers and the Diamondbacks give up one of their outfielders. It's a structure that has made sense on paper for a long time, right? The Blue Jays have way too many catchers. The D-backs have way too many outfielders. This is a move that makes a lot of sense for both sides, where each team is trading out of a surplus and they're giving up a really, really good player, right? In the case of the Blue Jays, I guess they're giving up a couple of good players with Gurriel included in this as well. But yeah, both teams are dealing from a place of strength and they're filling a gap on their team that is really a hole for them. And that's what catcher has sort of been in some ways for the D-backs. Carson Kelly has certainly been serviceable for them. But Gabby Moreno is on another level as far as what people expect he could be moving forward.
He is the third or fourth prospect in all of MLB, according to whichever prospect website you subscribe to. But regardless, one of the best prospects in MLB. Last season in the majors, he hit 319, 356, 377, which I'm not really that worried about, with a 319 batting average and a 733 OPS. So, but yeah, definitely somebody that can add to the offense, somebody that just made his debut. It's interesting because Mike Hazen obviously just said in the past that they wouldn't be trading for anybody that is a prospect anymore. They're going for major league ready guys. And to be honest, Moreno is just that. Like, he just fits the criteria, much like Corbin Carroll, much like Alek Thomas. He's just made his debut in baseball, but that's the great part about it. He fits that timeline with those guys so incredibly well that the future of this team is so bright with him behind the plate.
Yeah, Gabby Moreno, I mean, like, yeah, let's talk about this guy. If you look at Baseball America's mid-season top 100 prospects list, Gabby Moreno is number 3. He's 2 spots ahead of Diamondbacks outfielder Corbin Carroll, who, of course, we've spent all kinds of time raving about for very good reasons. Corbin Carroll arguably could be even the best prospect in baseball, but Gabby Moreno is right up there. And you have to think about, like, from the Diamondbacks perspective, Corbin Carroll was and has always been untouchable, right? We knew that they were looking to deal an outfielder. Corbin Carroll was not part of that group that they were looking to deal because he has so much value to the D-backs moving forward. And frankly, guys in that top 5, that top 10 list of prospects across all of baseball, you almost never see those guys traded, right? It is extremely rare to see a player of Corbin Carroll's caliber, or in this case of Gabby Moreno's caliber. And you have to understand, like, that's how well Gabby Moreno is viewed in the eyes of evaluators. Not only did he hit 320 last year upon arrival to the majors, which granted it's only 25 games, it's a pretty small sample. You said the 377 slugging percentage, his power hasn't really translated to the big leagues. And I'm not sure he's necessarily going to be, a 20 or 25 homer guy at any point, but he is a very, very good defender behind home plate. He's the kind of guy where even if he didn't hit, he would probably have a long major league career ahead of him just because of what he does defensively. And the fact that he is known to be the most athletic catcher who has come up since JT Realmuto. I believe that's what Fangraphs wrote about Gabby Moreno. You talk about that. You talk about just how athletic he is in general. It's compelling. It's compelling. And this is, I mean, if you're looking for a catcher of the future that the Diamondbacks could have, you're not going to find anyone better who is available than Gabby Moreno. It's really as simple as that.
it's an absolute home run. Now we're going to get to the heartbreaking nature of Daulton Varsho no longer being part of this team. But before that, we want to make sure everybody's fully excited about this trade, because Gabby Moreno is not the only part of this trade, right, Jesse?
Yes.
We are also getting back Lourdes Gurriel in this trade, which honestly is an incredibly talented young player himself. And I mean, by no means is he a throw in. The man slash he hit 291, 343, 400 last year for the Toronto Blue Jays, and honestly is kind of a great part of this trade. He plays left field, shortstop, and second base, so he's a versatile player, which we know Torey Lovullo absolutely loves guys like that. And honestly, Daulton Varsho is that his versatility is one of the things we're losing in this trade, and we're getting that back in Gurriel.
Yeah, Gurriel is a big addition to the trade for the D-backs for sure. It'll be interesting to see how the Diamondbacks plan on using Gurriel every day. Like you said, defensively last year he played mostly left field, which the D-backs, right, wasn't the purpose of this deal to trade an outfielder, right, and make it so you didn't have as many outfielders on the roster.
Yeah.
In some sense, it's a little confusing, right? Gurriel does bat right-handed instead of left-handed, so I guess that's good. There is that, but yeah, he's also played a lot of infield in the past as well. I don't think he's a shortstop. I think you probably want him more so at second base. That's more of a natural position for him. Maybe some third base as well.
Maybe.
I've received some I need to confirm this. I've gotten some conflicting information as far as how many years Gurriel is under control for. Jeff Passan in his article wrote that Gurriel is under control through 2024. But I've also read other articles that say that he's actually only under control through 2023. So we'll do our best. Maybe while we're on the air here, we can get a firm answer on that. But either way, Gurriel is not a long-term asset.
Baseball Reference has him arbitration eligible in 2024, free agent in 2025.
Right. Which is, that's what Baseball Reference has. But if you look at other websites, they seem to indicate differently. So I'm inclined to go with what Baseball Reference and Jeff Passan had in his article. But either way, Gurriel is he's not a long-term asset for the team. Right. So I think there's a world in which maybe you would look to trade Gurriel. Maybe the Diamondbacks are going to continue to make moves, and maybe he's not someone who actually winds up staying with the team long term. But he does bat right-handed, and he could certainly give some valuable innings at a number of different positions for the team next year.
We're getting confirmation from our investigators in the chat that say it's only until 2023. His contract is one more year, but yes, arbitration year after. So I believe them over any of these other guys, Jesse. I'm just telling you, I believe Scott Carter and Alex Uzier over anybody else, but I am excited for this return. You can't help but wonder what this does for Carson Kelly. Kelly now, I mean, is he going to play split time with someone like Gabby Moreno? Is he going to be okay being a backup catcher? That seems a bit doubtful. So it makes me wonder if the D-backs are now going to potentially package Carson Kelly in a trade for maybe another bullpen arm or somebody that can continue to assist with their positional needs at this point.
I'll just keep it simple here. I think I would be very surprised if Carson Kelly was still on the Diamondbacks for opening day of 2023. Gabby Moreno is a guy you're going to invest in fully, and Carson Kelly is frankly too good and too valuable of a player to have on your roster behind Gabby Moreno. I just don't think it makes sense. And he is a tradable asset. Even though Carson Kelly he isn't coming off a great year, you're not going to get as much for him as maybe you could have following the previous season or other good years that he's had in the past. I think it's pretty clear the Diamondbacks will look to move Carson Kelly in a trade at this point.
Well, when you talk about Gabby Moreno being very good, he can hit the ball hard. And when I say he can hit the ball hard, he can fucking hit the ball hard, Jesse. Watch this. Bang! Yeah, what is that? That's the ball embedded in the outfield wall, just embedded right in that shadow of that fan's hand, right there in the outfield wall. That's a monster, Jesse. Someone that can hit the ball that hard, you want on your side for sure.
Yeah, that's the biggest tool for sure with Gabby Moreno. Fangraphs had him as a current 60 On the 20 to 80 scouting scale with his hit tool with potential for 70, which is a number that you don't see thrown around very often by scouts. That's the thing that you're getting out of Gabby Moreno. If you want to find a guy who is about as sure of a thing to hit 300 as you're going to find, and obviously he's 22 years old and there's still some, maybe some growing pains in his future, but you're not going to find many guys in particular at the catcher position who have the hit tool that he does. If you look around the game, and this is something we've talked about a lot, is there aren't that many good catchers who can hit in baseball nowadays. Yeah. It's really rare. We talked about Sean Murphy being a possible trade candidate for this team. There's some other great catchers in the game as well. Will Smith, JT Realmuto, who we talked about earlier. But other than that elite, like 4 or 5 guys, which I think Gabby Moreno has a good chance to become a part of, there just aren't that many catchers in the game that are really game changers. And so as we kind of look on the flip side of this trade of like, oh my gosh, Daulton Varsho was a 5-WAR player last year, which is real, right? Like Daulton Varsho was really freaking good last year.
It's real.
But on the flip side, like having one of those elite few catchers is a bigger marginal advantage compared to other teams than having a outfielder as good as what Varsho was, at least on paper.
True.
Of course, you're betting on Moreno to actually become that player, and there's certainly going to be risks associated with that.
You're absolutely right about that, but let's talk about some of the positives. Obviously, I'm heartbroken. We know that Daulton Varsho had all the tools, and when I say all the tools, like all of those memes have to go in the trash.
How many
now,
tools,
or maybe
Derek?
he had all the tools, all of them, Jacob, every single tool. Home Depot had no tools because Daulton Varsho had all the damn tools, and I hate the fact that he's the guy that had to go. However, with that being said, and being a bit rational, the one thing about Daulton Varsho is because of his performance, because of his WAR, like Jesse pointed out, he's only going to get more and more expensive when it comes to arbitration, which he's closer than guys like Jake McCarthy and the other outfielders that they have, right? Not to mention the fact that you talked in the past, you spoke about the difference between trading Jake McCarthy versus trading Alec Thomas. And obviously it was about selling high versus selling low in the case of Alec Thomas versus McCarthy. Now with Daulton Varsho, you got to question if there's ever going to be a time where his value is higher than it is right now. It might, right? It might, and he might live up to fulfilling everything that we have seen out of him this season and beyond. But it also feels a little unlikely. Like it feels like there's a good chance like that this may have been one of his best seasons as far as WAR goes, and maybe this is the perfect time for people to sell or for a team to sell on him, right? I don't know. We don't know the future, and it sucks to lose somebody that was as valuable to this team as Daulton Varsho was. Few guys on this team were as valuable as Daulton Varsho, and that's the one part about this trade that at least the return seems fulfilling for the loss. We talked about some potential trades to Houston and other teams, and no matter what, it seemed very unlikely that they would get the caliber of player in return that they would be giving up in Daulton Varsho, because Varsh doesn't get that respect that he deserves. People don't look at those numbers and realize how valuable he was to the D-backs. And they don't realize like that a 1-for-1 trade with some of these superstar players is actually more fair than you might think it is, right? So the fact that the Diamondbacks were able to get back a return that fits their timeline so perfectly and benefits both teams, both the Blue Jays in receiving an caliber player of Varsho, and what the Diamondbacks get back as far as a guy like Gabby Moreno that fits their timeline with their young players so perfectly as well. It was the trade that made the most sense. We've talked about it several times prior to this, so it's wild that prophetically, this kept being a topic we dwelled on, this connection between Toronto and Arizona, and MLB trade rumors actually said the same thing we said, which is there's no report from John Heyman or Jeff Passan that these two teams are connected, but logically it makes the most sense considering the surplus of what each team has and what they would be giving up, right? Like the Diamondbacks realistically are still looking at a timeline of being competitive a bit further out than the 2023 season. If it happens this season, that's fantastic. But
Yeah.
I think realistically, internally, they're looking at more of 2024, 2025, whereas the Toronto Blue Jays might right now be looking at a more immediate time frame as far as their success. They have a young, exciting team up there. And again, Daulton Varsho fits the timeline that they have going on with their young team up there versus, realistically, their surplus of catchers that they have, that they would have a hard time getting playing time for all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we recognize like just how good of a player Daulton Varsho is.
Oh,
And
it breaks my heart.
frankly, if anyone, if I'm being honest, if anyone looks at this trade and thinks the Diamondbacks like fleeced the Blue Jays in this deal, you probably don't have a good enough understanding of just how good Daulton Varsho was last year. And I
leave
think
us alone, Jesse. Stop attacking us. We just want to live our lives. Okay.
He is one of the most underappreciated players in all of baseball. According to, and it's funny, I mean, we literally did our report cards on Daulton Varsho 2 days ago because
I said we had to. I was like, we have to. In text messages privately on the show, I was like, Jesse, we got to do this. He's going to be gone soon. And I didn't know. I thought we had more time. I thought we had more time than this. This was so short. We didn't even make it to Christmas.
We didn't even make it to Christmas. But yeah, all that to say, Daulton Varsho is a very, very, very good player. And the Blue Jays are getting a more sure thing in this trade than the Diamondbacks are, right? Daulton Varsho was basically a 5-WAR player last year and is probably only going to get better. There's some potential for him to benefit from the shift as well, from the shift restrictions that are going into place in 2023.
We talked about that a lot. Yeah.
So we have to be real about like, okay, this is a bit of a gamble for the D-backs. The D-backs are betting on Gabby Moreno being a franchise catcher, being, a guy who could make all-star teams. Jeff Passan called him an all-star caliber talent earlier today. The D-backs are betting on Gabby Moreno becoming that guy. And if he doesn't become that guy, which we have to be realistic, there is a chance that doesn't happen. He's only played 25 games in the big leagues. Yeah. This deal could go south for the D-backs pretty quickly. But I think,
why are you like this? What are you doing? What are you doing right now?
I'm being
Jesse.
What the fuck, Jesse? Man,
I know somebody has to live in reality, Jesse, but can you just give us a day?
Why do you have to bring me down to your reality? Thank you, Jacob, for being, the voice of reason here. Because I was wondering what the hell you were doing. I don't need this right now. You're right. I mean, yes, you're right. Of course. But like we said about Varsho, the same thing could happen, right? Yes, he's going to benefit greatly from the shift restrictions, but Varsho also had an incredible season that was unexpected, right? You could, at the least, cut his mic. He's right. Gabriel's right. He says cut his mic. But Antoine Lockhart, I hope I'm saying your name right, in the comments said, as a Jays fan, I'm not happy. And I mean, right there, I think that says a lot. He asked, is Varsho really worth us giving up Moreno and Lourdes? So like this is the feeling on both sides. And I will tell you confidently, yes, I will say that Daulton Varsho is just a guy that is really on the rise, I feel like. And again, he hasn't really stopped since the second half of 2021. All he needs is an opportunity, I feel like. And if he can be an everyday outfielder, he will continue to dazzle you with his incredible defense. And I think he's really coming around as a hitter. Once you get him around, maybe some of that beefy power you got up there in Toronto, you might even see him increase his numbers. I don't know. Like we said, this is a gamble for both sides, to be honest. And I realistically think the only reason why it makes sense for Toronto is because of their time frame. And I mean, it does definitely make more sense for the D-backs. I know they had the surplus of catchers. They were going to trade one. Varsho is going to be one of those guys that honestly makes them probably regret trading him. But I think the return, it's going to be like somebody said in the comments. I think it's going to be like Zach Gallen for Jazz Chisholm, where both teams love the player they got. But at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to say that the Diamondbacks didn't get the advantage in that trade. And at least for right now, it seems to be hard to say the Diamondbacks didn't get the advantage in this trade.
Yeah, I mean, if Gabby Moreno is the player that a lot of scouts expect him to be, then, I mean, he's the kind of player, like we said earlier, that rarely gets moved because there's just so much value there that it's like, what could you possibly get in return? in order to justify dealing him. And I see we do have some Blue Jays fans here with us today. And I want to emphasize that Daulton Varsho, like we said, he's arguably the best outfield defender in baseball. And so if you're looking at his, 740 OPS or whatever it was and wondering like, wow, we just traded, a top 5 prospect in baseball and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for this guy. I understand looking at the numbers, it's going to feel weird, but once you see what he brings defensively, and the fact that there really is room for improvement, like I don't necessarily think that Daulton Varsho was a finished product in 2022. He really put up very similar numbers to 2021. There's probably another gear that he can reach here.
Jordan Binner in the comments says, I'm a Jays fan. Curious if you guys like this. I will say that it's heartbreaking to lose Daulton Varsho. It really is.
Yeah.
But I do like this trade. And I kind of agree with Jesse. I think that the Diamondbacks got the advantage here, but who knows? I think that it's a very fair trade for what the return is, despite the fact that you guys are losing 2 young, very good players for Varsh. But Varsh is just an incredibly versatile player who seems to do well no matter where you play him at. And that's a hard trait. The guy came up in the system as a catcher. At some point, it was decided that he was much more effective in the outfield than behind the plate. But it's not like he still can't play catcher, and it's not like he can't play literally anywhere in the outfield. I wouldn't be surprised if Daulton Varsho could go pitch like 3 innings scoreless. That wouldn't surprise me either, right? But I will say that it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, and I definitely understand based on what the return. We were a little hesitant to think that the Toronto Blue Jays would pull the trigger on a trade for Moreno. We thought maybe one of their other catchers might be a little bit more right with the, what they're willing to part with. His future is very bright. And again, his you're talking about the number 3 prospect in all of baseball in 2022. So the Diamondbacks really have exactly what they want, is a young team that's very exciting and kind of all right now, for the most part, are a pretty similar timeline. Like I said, the one thing about Daulton Varsho is if he continued to be as good as he was only going to get more expensive. And then there was going to be a point inevitably where the Diamondbacks would most likely, be at a, position to decide to pay a lot of money for him that they probably wouldn't be willing to pay that he could get elsewhere. So I love this trade, to be honest. And I think I honestly hope Blue Jays fans love him too, because he is somebody that's incredible. Shout out to Ray Moreno in the chat, who's very excited that he doesn't have to buy a customized jersey anymore. And he said, again, I think he asked something about Carson being moved. I think we both think that this is an inevitability that Carson gets moved. And, I knew that there were more bullets in Mike Hazen's gun. I just wasn't expecting this. Really, I think I mean, even though we talked about it, like I wasn't expecting this to actually happen. I wasn't expecting really Daulton Varsho at the end of the day to be part of a trade unless it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Once we heard his name come up, though, like him and Alec Thomas's name both came up in trade talks. You knew that they at least were considering this kind of move. So, in the end, I'm glad he's not in the National League. Especially glad he's not in the National League West, and I'm very excited to see him succeed in the American League for sure. Much like Jesse Friedman with his last-minute Christmas shopping, the Diamondbacks come in right at the last minute like a hero and bring us something to be excited about. I'm excited about this. I'm pumped, Jesse. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about this baby backs team that we're going to have out there on the outfield next season.
It is. I mean, like if you're thinking about this from a D-backs perspective in terms of like what you lose in this trade, like all those things we said about how great Daulton Varsho is, like absolutely, those things are all true. But also, if you believe that Alec Thomas is going to figure it out, if you believe that Jake McCarthy is for real, those two combined with Corbin Carroll is still a really freaking good outfield. Like that's still a really, really good outfield moving forward.
Yes,
and you've got all of those guys under control for many, many, many more years. And you've got Gabby Moreno under control for 6 more seasons as well. It's going to be fascinating, Derek. One thing that is striking me is that the D-backs have I believe Gabby Moreno still has rookie eligibility. So you've got Gabby Moreno, you've got Corbin Carroll, you've even maybe got Brandon Pfaadt in the mix for, and there's Dre Jameson.
We got all the rookies of the year.
The
All the
D-backs
rookies of the year on our team.
Many candidates for rookie of the year.
Injected in my veins.
Now we'll see who's the real top prospect, Jesse. We'll see who's the real top prospect.
That's right. They'll play it out on the field against each other every single night on the same team. This is very exciting.
The D-backs will play the Blue Jays, of course, next year as part of the new scheduling system. So it will be fun to see.
Yeah, they will.
Varsho 4 home run game incoming.
Shut the fuck up, Jacob. Get out of here with your negativity. We don't need that right now. God damn it. Oh, that's exciting, though. I'm very excited for this. I can't wait to see how things play out. And of course, we knew this was going to happen. The Diamondbacks weren't shopping around, I think, to just not pull a deal. But I think the obvious thing here was if they were going to get rid of a guy like Varsh with the WAR that he has and the value that he has, they were going to get back a haul that made sense. And this makes more sense than I think even the Sean Murphy trade that we talked about in the past. So this by far seems to make the most sense. And yes, I would love to fire Jacob, but I think he's my boss. I don't even know how that works, but anyway, what are your thoughts, Jesse, on this trade overall?
One thing I want to mention that I think is important to recognize from a D-back standpoint, and one of the big reasons that we thought Daulton Varsho might not be moved is that he hit 27 home runs last year. And the D-backs didn't have a lot of power hitters on this roster last year.
Outside of him and Christian Walker.
Yeah, it's Varsho and Christian Walker. That's really where all of those home runs came. If you look at the two players the D-backs got in return, Gabby Moreno is a fantastic hitter, right? But if you're looking for power, that's not really something he showed in the big leagues last year. And it's also something we've seen a little bit of it during his minor league career. A couple years ago, he had some decent power numbers. I think it was in AA. But by and large, Moreno is doesn't project as like a 25 homer type of a guy. And neither does Lourdes Gurriel Jr. I believe he hit 5 home runs last year. So I do wonder if maybe this kind of forces the D-backs hands in some way to maybe try to bring in, like a DH type to come in and like somebody who really has some power, or whether that's a trade. Maybe Gurriel isn't here to stay when it's all said and done. Maybe the Diamondbacks have another play in mind here where they can maybe add some power to the roster. But I do think it's important to note that there's a pretty lofty hit tool up and down the roster, but in terms of power, there's not much that I think you could count on going into 2020.
It's all right. We'll just do the carousel thing, Jesse. Everybody gets on and over, and that,
there you go.
You know that frustrates a pitcher more than home runs for sure. Home runs clear the board for him. He's ready to go and start over fresh. Not to be overshadowed by this trade, but the D-backs also acquired Diego Castillo earlier, and that's a thing that happened. Worth mentioning, of course, but not nearly the acquisition that Gabby Moreno is.
Yeah, the Diego Castillo move is interesting. Castillo was designated for assignment by the Pittsburgh Pirates a few days ago. So this wasn't obviously a high-profile trade. Certainly nothing compared to the swap with the Toronto Blue Jays. But Castillo hit lefties pretty well last year. He slugged over 500. That was his first taste of the big leagues. He's 25 years old. So I don't know if he's necessarily a guy the D-backs are slotting in as, a big league player for the entire season, but there's some good depth there for the D-backs and just, making sure they have another bat and a right-handed bat, a guy who performs better against lefties than righties, which is generally something the D-backs need, even though now they've moved on from Varsho. They're still a little bit left-handed heavy. So the acquisition does make sense for them.
Antoine Lockhart says that Gurriel was our best hitter for like 2 months in regards to the Blue Jays, so that's very encouraging. Yeah. And Pedro Alcala says, what about the bullpen? Still very iffy for me. I wouldn't be surprised. They have made some moves. They're not very sexy, exciting moves, but Scott McGuff and Miguel Castro obviously are moves that they've made. There's still, I think, trades out there to be done. That's the one thing, especially after this trade. We definitely feel like there's more moves to be made. And to be honest, those moves are probably going to be centered around bullpen pieces, which, to be honest, at this point would be fine. The last thing you wanted to do was trade somebody of Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy, or Daulton Varsho's caliber for a minor league, or not, I'm sorry, a relief pitcher, a bullpen arm.
Yeah,
like,
right.
No matter how good they are, unless you're talking about one of the best arms in the league, you're really not going to justify the return for somebody that's going to be an everyday player, the caliber of those guys, right? So at this point, it feels a little likely that maybe, like we said, Carson Kelly might be moved. There's some other potential candidates to be moved, depending on what their plan is with Gurriel. So
Yeah,
again, there's depends on what direction the Diamondbacks are going to go with this, but there is a lot of versatility out there, especially from Lourdes Gurriel. So I don't know what direction they're going to go. It's just very exciting, Jesse. It's again, we were terrified of this move, whichever outfielder it was, and now that it's happened, I feel okay with it because we got quite the return from the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, there's risk in all of that, like we said earlier, with dealing a guy like Varsho. But if you were to try to figure out, like, okay, if we were to trade Daulton Varsho, what's like an ideal trade package that you could get back, knowing that there's going to be risk in making that deal, but what's like the best you could realistically get? I think this move is a pretty darn good one. Like, if you're dealing a guy like a Varsho's caliber, it's going to be tough because Varsho is so good and he's already proven, and his defense is so good that even if he doesn't improve with the bat, he's still like a 4 or 5 win player year in, year out, as long as he defends this well. But yeah, like Gabby Moreno, again, type of guy the teams just don't trade. You just don't trade especially a catcher, right? That is this highly touted and has already had success in the big leagues. This isn't a guy who's a year or two away. We've seen some of those catchers dealt in the past. This is a guy who's already done it at the big league level. He has a monstrous arm. He's very well regarded defensively, and he has like a 60 grade hit tool. Like, that's just not something you can get in most trade markets. And if you're trying to piece together, like, okay, how good of a return do we have to get in order to deal Varsho, this is about as good as I think I could realistically imagine that return being.
Shout out to Real Deal Prime. He says, I'm from Canada, Jays fans here. We have a few catchers here in Toronto. We know you did, my guy. We've actually been coveting your catchers for a little bit, and that's what makes us truly excited about this deal. Oh, see, that Jacob's a scamp. He's a scamp, that guy. But of course, we have 63 days now, Jesse. 63 days until spring training kicks off. So we are very excited to be all about that. And of course, we are here in Arizona, so we will be covering that for you guys. All of you Blue Jays fans want to keep an eye on this guy. Keep tuned in right here. We appreciate you guys being here. Of course, we have so much to dig into when it comes to Gabby Moreno and the future of this team. And like we said, there is definitely some more moves to be made. So in the meantime, keep your eyes right here. Follow us on Twitter. I am at cap_caveman with a K. Jesse is at Jesse N. Friedman. Our show is at PHNX_DBacks. But of course, all roads lead to at PHNX_sports on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We thank you guys so much for being here. On behalf of Jacob, that scamp, Jesse, and myself, we always appreciate you guys tuning in, and thank all of you Blue Jays fans, D-backs fans. We thank all of you guys for being here. And remember, kids, baseball is fun, but it's so much more fun when you make a trade that benefits both teams. Let's go.